Board of Education on December 18th, 2018. Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Beatty Bar.
Here.
Blakely.
Here.
Dryden.
Yes.
Gaspar.
Here.
Locke. Lowe.
Present.
Dremel.
Here. Mrs. Blakely, could you please say this in the pledge?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, investigations, are there any items to be removed from or added to the agenda?
There are not.
All right, excellent. The first item on our agenda tonight is public comments. If you would like to make public comments, please make sure that you've got a pink sheet from Kathy Scafidi. We will need you to fill it out with your full name and address because we need to keep a full record up for our minutes. And when we have you address the board, we ask that you come to the table so that we can all hear you. We want to let you know that at that time we don't enter into a dialogue. It's our chance to listen, but it doesn't mean we don't take your issues seriously. So if you'd like someone to follow up with you, please let Kathy Scafidi know, and we will make sure that someone follows up with you on your topic. We're going to ask everyone to please be very strict about your time limit tonight. If you start to go over, we'd be happy to give you a warning, but we have quite a few speakers and a relatively full agenda that we want to make sure we have enough time for, so we'll be adhering to that. I have them in order, so I'll call people up in the order that they were submitted. So the first
What is the time limit?
Oh, 3 minutes.
3?
Yes.
Okay.
The first person I'd like to invite is Angel Haney.
My name is Angel Haney and I'm a Louise White parent. I am here tonight on behalf of several fourth grade families to speak to you about our concerns with the current class size in the fourth grade. I want to start by saying how happy we are to be a part of Batavia Public Schools. We know our fourth grade teachers are doing the best they can given the situation. My children have had great teachers and great experiences at Louise White School. Last year when a section of our current fourth grade was eliminated, we were apprehensive. We feared with just 2 fourth grade sections, more students would move into our classes and it would be too crowded. We need a productive, safe, and supportive learning environment. Our fears have come true, and before the first semester has ended, we have 31 students per section and have maxed out the classroom space. No more desks or kids can fit. This has created too many opportunities for distractions. My daughter and I have regular conversations about school. There are frequently classmates off task and disruptive. This makes the abundance of independent learning time she has more difficult and hard to concentrate. My child ends up having to finish her work quickly. With a smaller class size, it's easier to tune out other students. With a large amount of kids, my child gets less time to present her work, her favorite thing. These things have led to decreased confidence. In addition, more students mean longer transition time, which takes away from meaningful learning experiences. As a fellow educator, I know the importance of classroom management, group discussions, independent learning, and how class size factors into all of them. I want kids to have the best opportunities for learning, for growth, and for success. I can personally tell you there's a large difference between having 20 students and having 25 students in a class, and a large difference between 25 and 30 students in a class. Every additional student added makes for more difficult classroom management. It makes for less opportunities for movement. It makes for less opportunities for everyone to participate in a group discussion, and it makes for less opportunities for one-on-one time. It just can't happen on a regular basis. It is impossible for students to get sufficient time with the teacher. My child still needs that one-on-one time. For continued social and emotional growth, she needs that time and those opportunities. I don't want any kid to fall through the cracks. These kids need a learning environment that ensures maximum development, growth, and achievement for all students. This district is committed to focusing all resources, people, time, and money on the critical task of maximizing student success. My daughter says math and guided reading are the easiest times of the day to complete work. What about the rest of the day? They're missing out on valuable chances for collaborative learning experiences and small group opportunities for added success. Right now, we need additional support for science and social studies. Right now, opportunities for smaller groups can create better learning opportunities for our kids. Right now, we need support to be able to let our children take a field trip. They've had none this year. They need to be able to maximize their physical education time. It takes longer to quiet and engage 31 students for instructions than it does for only 25. There are numerous houses for sale in LWS neighborhoods. Louise White is exemplary, and families are looking for their children to attend LWS. Our class size will continue to grow, and we need you to accommodate our kids and the new kids coming in. We will need a third section for next year. In closing, I think we all want the same thing. We want what is best for kids. Let us be partners in achievement. We have the largest elementary class sizes in the district. Please consider giving extra support personnel to our students for this year. And please help our students have that much needed third section for 5th grade next year. Focus the most important resources on our children. Maximize their success with the needed people, time, and money.
Thank you. I did want to remind people too, I know a lot of times that we have people here to support each other on the same topic. You are welcome to just come up and tell us, I'm in full agreement with the speaker before me. Feel free to add if you have new points, but I didn't want you to feel compelled to repeat because you'll still go on the record as being supporting that. Just want to make sure you all knew that was an option. Glenn Kraus.
Okay, my name's Glenn Kraus. I'm a retired educator after 37 years, high school counselor, have a special ed background. I've done extensive research on your district regarding the Illinois 5 Essential Survey. Now, I just want to ask everybody sitting there, if your spouse came to you and you had a real concern about something that your spouse was doing or something happening in your family, and your spouse didn't listen to you or didn't do anything about it, how would you feel as, you know, that your spouse just dismisses you? So let me talk about the Illinois 5 Essentials. I'm not going to get into the specifics here because I've done that. I'm not going to repeat that. But the Illinois 5 Essential Survey is the only vehicle that public schools have in the state of Illinois for certified staff, parents, and students to voice how they feel about the school that they're at. If nothing is really done about the data, the survey really does no good. I know the Illinois State Board, this is the first year coming up for that all schools have to take it every year, and there is a choice of an alternate. But if nothing's done with the data, then the survey really doesn't mean too much. Now, in 4 of your 6 schools, there's a real trust issue between certified staff and principal. And all you know, in any relationship you guys have, whether it's your spouse, your relatives, your employers, it's all about trust. Everything builds off of trust. If you don't have trust, that affects communication and respect. And if there's a lack of trust between the principal and the faculty, this is what happens. The faculty, they're participants in their own classroom because they own the classroom. But outside the classroom, they're only passengers. So things that a school collectively wants to be done, it's more difficult to get that done because there's a lack of trust between the faculty and the principal. And you really have to improve on that. So this packet I passed out, this, I'm just going to use generalities. That's a letter I sent to Dr. Hitchens with the specifics of the percentages on 6 schools, and the 6 letters preceding that, I
Mr.
sent...
Klaus, we're at 3 minutes. Would you be able to summarize quickly for us?
Yeah. Are letters that I sent to the principals. And I compared the 2016 Illinois survey to the 2018 on the 6 schools. And in a nutshell, they did poorer on the 2018 survey in the key areas. Any questions?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to invite Marcia Brown.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Brown, and I'm fortunate to have lived in this Batavia Bulldog town with my husband for the past 16 years. Together we have 4 children who all have had the pleasure to experience the exemplary Louise White School. Our oldest daughter is successfully working in the salon in San Diego. Our second daughter is in her 3rd year at University of Iowa studying biomedical engineering. Our 7th grade son is consistently on the A honor roll at Rotolo and involved in football, wrestling, and baseball. My 4th grade son is the reason why I'm here tonight to speak to you. The last few weeks, my family has processed what is happening with the Louise White 4th grade class size. We see a theme that the focus on information given is mainly supports for math and reading. We have trust and good faith that plans put in place work based off of formative and summative data. In my 22nd year of teaching high school science and engineering, I am expected to contribute to math and science reading scores. I would think that music, art, wellness, PE, science, and social studies curriculum would also contribute to this learning as well. I see a 31-to-1 ratio in these areas a big disservice to my child at LWS. My son has failed his last 3 AR reading tests. This is uncharacteristic of his previous year's scores in which the pattern did not happen. My husband has taken the advice from the teacher to write notes and discuss each chapter. We thought he'd come home celebrating a win with this last one. Instead, he started uncontrollably crying. We had another uncontrollably crying experience with long division the week before. A little history to explain why this is a big piece of data is that my son was at a very low level entering Louise White in his testing in kindergarten. With my son's determined hard work, attitude, and teamwork of the amazing LWS community, it's amazing. He has come so far. These crying episodes are heart-wrenching to watch. Kids at 9 years old come to school with emotions. Okay, I might lose it. I realize this is a bit extreme, but my family had survived at the beginning of the school year an anaphylactic shock experience the first week of school. My family members, including my 4th grader, was in a horrific car accident that week before. My son is a very caring and tender-hearted young man, and is his social emotional needs being met? Last week, a boy standing in his classroom line to go out the door asked my son, "Hey, I heard you are a state champion wrestler, and if you think you're tough, I want to fight you at recess." He ignored him and was very frustrated and still is. The continued bullying by this young man is giving our whole family anxiety. Our supports with high ratios modeling constructive behavior successful on the same as this lower level student ratios. Is the climate for the staff to do this positive? LWS teachers are the most amazing people I've ever met, and principal who is here tonight. They are hardworking and truly caring for our kids. I helped out at a Halloween party for only an hour and can't imagine the 31-to-1 ratio.
Mrs. Brown, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're at 3.5 minutes. Can you summarize your
Yes,
points for us?
my heart does go out to Donna and Nelson. My data for my son, the 31-to-1 9-year-old, is not good. My husband and I believe the power of being positive and always humbly working as a team with advocating for our children. As a team, how can we get the data that the plan is working? Thank you so much for all that you guys do and continue to do for our students to be successful. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm over.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Thank you.
I know it's hard when you're going. I just didn't want to.
Thank you.
All right, next I'd like to invite Laura Schreiner.
Good evening. My name is Laura Schreiner, and I have a 4th grader in Mr. Nelson's class at Louise White, and my daughter Annabelle, who's in the kindergarten this year there as well. This is my first board meeting, and for good reason. As compliments to you all, I'm of the mentality that if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I know that Batavia schools are excellent, and kudos on the exemplary report card for this year. These results concur that there's a mutual expectation of high standards for education that match our high taxes. I must note that diving into the report card details, the average class size reports 23 students, and our 4th grade class has 31 students, 35% more kids than the average, which clearly we know is an outlier and is of issue. When you leave the sweet spot of plus or minus 26 kids of elementary age, which is on your BPS webpage expected guidelines, which was very helpful, you have a lack of order predictability going on. This is entropy, or for lack of a better term, chaos. There's simply too much energy in these classrooms. Now on to what I call the shenanigans. Everyone knows what it feels like to be in a class with shenanigans because we were either partakers in it or we were observers surviving it. And I'm speaking outside of what is above and beyond fourth grade normal behavior. Shenanigans increases as exponentially as class size increases. First, the noise levels during independent working time, and hushing a class that size is difficult even on a good day. I'm witness to this, and it has nothing to do with Mr. Nelson's teaching style. It's the sheer number of students, period. Secondly, the lack of physical and personal space is compromised, leaving our kids packed in like sardines. That's hardly a conducive working environment, even for a few hours a day. Today, my son reported that during guided reading, which was at a smaller class size, a desk fell on one of the students, causing her to be bruised and go to the nurse for some ice. I realize accidents happen in any size classroom, but I'm wondering if this is a safety issue, considering all these fourth grade bodies sitting on a small piece of carpeting that they can't even fit on. So it's a space issue as well. Third is the loss of personal connection with the teacher. There's no time for differentiation or teachers developing a rapport with 31 kids. My son stated the only time he could feel he could approach his teacher with a question or concern that would actually get addressed was during his recess time, a 10 to 15 minute period when there wasn't a line to see Mr. Nelson around his desk. The fourth point is the minute amount of time each student has to share information individually or in a smaller group to the rest of the class. Learning is thus slowed, and getting through all the curriculum becomes a challenge. And lastly, what about our teachers? Are we burning them to a crisp by the end of the day? The demands on their time, their patience, and their self-sacrifice have to have an ending point in a healthful manner. When our kids were divided into smaller group size for their guided reading groups and math classes, not surprisingly, the entropy and the chaos decreased. So that seems to be working so far. I will add that I appreciate, acknowledge, and praise what Dr. Skomer and all of his staff have done thus far to problem solve part of the day's issues, but I'd like to clone him, but unfortunately science is not there yet, and at some point he can only do so much for us without your support and understanding of the situation. Our unique situation with 31 kids in each class reminds me of the famous quotation, "It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission."
Mrs. Schreiner, we're at almost 4 minutes. Can you summarize the rest of your points for us?
Sure will. In acting swiftly and decisively now rather than apologizing for it later should the student numbers go down this summer will prove to better be prepared than sorry. Starting out the year at 28 and watching the class grow with delayed response was not being prepared, and there's some sorry happening via the shenanigans. It's well worth the risk in planning for next year and finishing off this year successfully versus changing what entropy has created. So thank you for your time, and thank you all for being on the board.
Thank you. All right, I've got David and Mary Niekamp.
Thank you. Good evening.
Will you be speaking for both your times?
I will. Well, I might be shorter, so
Okay.
I speak to the board. Thanks for seeing me. I speak to the parents. My name is Dr. David Niekamp. I am a licensed clinical psychologist who has worked in the Fox Valley for 20 years. I have lived in Batavia for 24 years and have 2 daughters in the BPS 101 district. A school board's mandates includes setting effective policies that are fair and equitable for all students. Any policy that does not create sound outcomes for all students will be deemed unfair and inequitable and therefore subject for review. This is especially true for those policies that disrupt or inhibit sound outcomes. Safety, another mandate of the board, is a primary element in establishing an appropriate learning environment. In the absence of safety, a student is not likely to enter into the necessary state of vulnerability to learn. Trauma, an impediment to the learning process. Trauma can be defined as any experience outside of expected patterns that poses a threat, real or perceived, to the individual's established sense of safety and can be experienced physically, emotionally, and psychologically. A metaphor. Both lightning and termites are clearly destructive. Lightning's damage is obvious. Termites, in contrast, are clandestine and potentially far more destructive. By the time you discover the damage, done quietly and slowly over a long period of time, the structure's safety and stability has been permanently compromised. Like termites, psychological and emotional trauma, especially when the foundations of identity are being established in childhood and adolescence, invisibly erode a child's sense of self and safety. Everything looks okay on the outside, but things can implode internally at any point. People in physical shock have been reported to run out of burning buildings on a broken leg. The effect of the trauma is suppressed for the purpose of reaching safety, after which they collapse. The same goes for those in psychological trauma. The effect of the initial impact is often delayed until long after the causal event has passed, especially when the individual does not feel safe or lacks the verbal lexicon to openly express their feelings about the experience. Children are entirely dependent upon their caretakers to ensure their safety. Unexpectedly being exposed to opposite-sex children in locker rooms and bathrooms, and being told that their experience is mistaken, has no merit, or in some cases overtly wrong, is to introduce psychological termites into their fragile, budding identity. This puts the child at risk to internalize their trauma. Current policy on allowing full access for those students who identify as transgender is not only disruptive, but it has inhibited sound educational outcomes for numerous students. Granting full access simply based on an unverifiable assertion and a request is a high-risk policy. Students who identify as transgender are self-labeled and need not engage in any verifying process. No other student is allowed to access special programming or educational support without a verifying process such as an IEP, entrance exam, and the like. This policy clearly has not been reviewed by an appropriately credentialed professional body, and the impact of this policy on other students has not been sufficiently considered. As the elected representatives of this community, I ask that the board listen to its community and adjust its current policy, which grants full access to anyone who simply makes a statement and that has no objective measures for review. To ignore this request is to put all our children at risk of being traumatized. Providing private locker rooms and bathrooms for students who self-label as transgender is the most effective way to guarantee sound outcomes for all BPS students. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Kelly Glass to the table.
Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I've never done this before.
Oh, that's all right.
Right there with you.
I was going to say, we've all had that moment.
Ah.
Good example to your children.
Yes.
Stephanie.
Thank you very much. I stand before you as an advocate for Joseph Blatt, my child. He's in Mr. Nelson's 4th grade class. He's number 7 of 31. Joseph is kind, sensitive, and has enjoyed his experiences at Louise White until this year. My husband and I could see a sharp shift in Joe's attitude shortly after the school year started. He was suddenly either apathetic or crying his eyes out that he doesn't want to go to school. This is not an exaggeration, I assure you, as this is the first time I've ever had to contact a school counselor. When asked, he said that he couldn't concentrate and couldn't finish his work, and this started the anxiety. He questioned why it was so much different this year, and for that I had no answer. Not only do I worry about Joe's mental state and attitude towards school, but I also worry about some of the work that he's bringing home. Many pieces are incomplete. Often he struggles to remember what was for homework. He's anxious about incomplete work, but says that he can't complete it and that he can't hear when Mr. Nelson teaches. Although I know this happens some of the time, it's a constant struggle with Joe this year. At this point, I think he's given up, and for that I'm worried. Because if this work is incomplete and inaccurate, I really worry about the bad habits he's gaining this year and the impact it'll have on his future school career. I co-teach a math class of 31 students with 2 other adults daily. I teach 5th grade, and after 16 years in a national board certification, I can say I run a pretty tight ship. Last Friday, both of my colleagues were out due to personal reasons, so I taught alone. Based on my experience, I give these teachers a lot of credit. I don't care how strong you are as an educator, anything over 25 is complete chaos, and many of the students' needs were not met that day. I hope you know that Mr. Nelson and Ms. Donnet are facing serious challenges every day, and you are lucky to know that they are so strong in their careers. You should be ashamed of yourselves to think that 31 in a 4th grade classroom is tolerable. You are putting unneeded stress on these teachers throughout the day. Further, shuffling students from teacher to teacher, especially for a subject as critical as English language arts, will have serious negative data outcomes in the future. My child sees a paraprofessional for ELA and doesn't even know her name. I'm concerned that communication between teachers is not consistent and that Mr. Nelson may not, by no fault of his own, have a handle on Joey's needs and progress in reading. If you think that teaching over 25 students is manageable, I challenge you to come in and teach one of these subjects for 1 hour. No help, just you and these 31 personalities. Finally, we moved to Batavia from Plainfield so that our children could experience a small town feel and also experience solid schools. Until this year, we were glad that we made the decision. Now as we struggle to keep Joe on track, we question if this year and the struggles will be the norm for this district. I really hope that you right some of the wrong decisions you made this year. If not for me, then for Joey's sake. Looking forward to our 5th grade staff at Louise White, I know they will definitely struggle with many of the student needs in this class. I can't even imagine the lasting impact that this will have on students like Joseph. I'd like to thank you for your time and urge you to get into these classrooms, see what it looks like, what it feels like, and make sure that students like Joey are getting the quality education that you promised. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Rebecca Saboka.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Rebecca Sabolka. I'm currently the PTO president at Louise White School. I have a 4th grader, 1st grader, and then a preschooler. I'm here tonight to represent, just like other moms and dads have come up, the 4th grade parents. I appealed to the board at a June meeting, so if I look familiar, that is why, when we learned that our students were going from 3 sections in 3rd grade to 2 sections in 4th grade. We were concerned then and are even more concerned now. Our 4th grade classes have ballooned to 31, like we have talked about all evening, well over that recommended number for the district, which is 26. My main concern is how my child is spending his day in a classroom like this. From an email we received from Dr. Skomer that outlined the daily routine of our 4th graders, I'm not convinced that this situation is best practice. From the email, you can see that our students are learning either individually or in a 1:31 ratio for approximately 70% of their day. They are only working in small groups and more personalized learning for math and ELA time. While I agree that these are important subjects to assess, I do not feel as though this is the only thing my child should be measured on. When asked how we will know if the 1:31 ratio is working, several responses we've gotten is that we'll wait for MAP testing. I have concern about this and have voiced that concern that that's not good enough, and I know it's not good enough for other parents. Why can't we ask the kids how it's going, interview them, ask them how they're feeling about it? Why can't we have people come in and observe what it looks like to have 31 kids in a classroom? All things we have proposed, but nothing has been followed through upon or communicated to us. We understand that it is highly unlikely to hire a full-time teacher partway through the year. It can be disruptive to students, and we get that. But what about hiring a part-time teacher to help with some of those other subjects during the day, like social studies and science? It cannot be easy, and I know that it's not possible to do science experiments and pull projects in class like you can when you have 20 or 25 students. I can't imagine trying to monitor 1 or 31 students with a science something going on. Let's help our students actually learn something in those instead of being crammed into a room, working on a worksheet by themselves. Let's also look at ways that we can help with the physical space for our students. Give them some room so they're not on top of one each other, so they're not getting sick and missing days due to things like strep, lice, the flu. At the very least, let's plan on ways to make sure that this doesn't happen again next year when our students are in 5th grade. We understand that student enrollment is hard to predict, but let's plan ahead now so that we can use the data that we have and what we're doing now to plan for the future. If we continue adding students to our 4th grade classes at this pace, we will be at 38, 39 kids in the classroom by the end of the year. When is enough enough? We appreciate your time in hearing our request and really look forward to working with all of you and our building administration and our awesome 4th grade teachers to help continue to support our students and our families. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda are our VPS partners. I'd like to invite Todd Swanson, President of the DEA.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Todd.
Just a real quick update for the upcoming board elections. I just thought I'd let people on the board know what our process is for the BEA. All board candidates that are being running will be receiving a questionnaire from the BEA that they can fill out and return to us. And then in January, you can expect that to be coming. And in February, at our BEA executive board meeting, we invite candidates to come and have a question and answer session with the BEA. And the BEA will then kind of go over those questions and answers and go through a recommendation process for board candidates. So I know board petitions were just due, and so I wanted to make that process known to everybody. And then the only other thing that I have is that we're coming up to break, and it's going to be a great time for everyone to relax, recharge, rejuvenate, come back ready to tackle 2019. So have a great break, everyone, and we'll see you next year.
Thanks. All right, next on our agenda, VPS partners would be our student ambassadors.
Yes. So at the high school, the equity training that we talked about last time, there was going to be a date, but that date got canceled because it was snowing profusely. And so that got rescheduled. So now it's going to be back to back in January and then with the 3rd date in April. And we're very excited to host that. And then also at the high school, one of the juniors, Kyle Wolford, was able to get a 36 on his ACT, perfect score. I believe it was his first try as well, so that was very exciting. And also, the Illinois State Scholars just got announced for the graduating class, and at BHS there are around 90 kids that got recognized as state scholars, so that's very impressive. And that is based on GPA and test scores, and it's like the top 10% of students in the state.
And then also, No Shave November was wrapped up by National Honor Society, and in total they raised $5,368 that will be donated to 3 different cancer research foundations. Other things, it's finals week, so you get that feeling in the school, and everyone's tired, everyone's anxious, but we're all excited for break. So we have finals coming up Thursday and Friday. The schedule will be adjusted for the high schoolers to take their finals, and then right after break when we get back, we have Rock the Runway on January 11th, which is going to come up fast, and then Mr. BHS just started collecting money, I believe, last week, and that'll be January 12th, right when we get back. So lots going on.
January 12th, so back to back.
January 11th and then January 12th, okay. Yeah.
And the money that the people in Mr. BHS are raising, it's all going to go towards spastic paralysis research,
Yeah.
or
I think they do that every year.
Yeah.
So.
Very exciting. Thanks, guys. Good luck on your finals. Now leave, go study.
Thank you.
All right, let's do committee updates next. We can start with Chris.
I think the only thing that I have is I did go to III just to go vote at the delegate assembly. And the big concern that a lot of people have was the proposal about potentially giving board member permission to allow teachers to arm themselves, and that actually failed. So that is pretty much the big story from that show.
I unfortunately missed CAC this month, so I have nothing to add. Bob?
I was fortunate enough to attend 2 committee meetings
Nice.
since our last. My regular appearance on the RAC committee, which is always exciting, and I encourage everyone to come out and join us for that because you learn all the ins and outs and everything, and you learn how to predict the future. And speaking of which, we will be delivering our 2020 forecast document later this evening. So hang on to the edge of your seats because it's very good. It's an excellent, excellent report. And I also had the privilege to attend the insurance committee meeting this last week.
Thank you.
Also a page turner.
Thank you.
However, that one is not nearly as exciting. We were delivered some not so great news. We're in our first quarter of our insurance plan. Our insurance renews for the district in July. So we received our first quarterly report on insurance, and we are sitting currently 11.26% above forecast on our outgoings. So that is not a very great trend, and that's on top of the premium increase that we already experienced last year as well. So we've identified this as a target of concern. It's like the one thing we don't have control over budget-wise is the increased cost of healthcare and health insurance. And this committee is working very hard to try to figure out how to make that work best for everyone in the district. So stay tuned.
Thanks, Bob. John Dryden?
I was in Iceland. Bob went to my meeting for me. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
John Gaspar?
The only thing I have is Hall of Honor, and I'm going to do a presentation with a little help from Sue to make this simple. The Hall of Honor nominations are due February 1st, but I thought, and I asked Lisa yesterday, maybe we should show people where to go because I always get lost doing this. So I figured I'm going to turn this over to Sue right now, and she can guide you through as long as the BATV points to that screen right now. And Sue takes over.
It's really easy. Go to About, go to BPS Hall of Honor, and then you go to this link, which shows you the nomination process.
Nice.
You go there, and then you can do it electronically, or you can download the nomination form. And that's all you have to do.
I like the tutorial.
Right,
Thank you.
so
It's very good, huh?
people nominated, just 3 people.
Seems pretty simple, John. What was the issue?
I can't find things. Just give me a piece of paper.
Make that a regular segment.
Thanks, Sue.
On the website and show people where it's looking.
All right, those are our committee updates. We also have scheduled tonight a public hearing on amending our fiscal year 19 budget. I apologize, Tony, did we open the floor for additional comments just on the budget? All right, then I would like to open the hearing, and if there's anybody that would like to comment on the budget, nobody asked ahead of time. Was there anyone in the audience that wanted to make comments on our budget? All right, then I'll close the hearing. Did you need to take us through an update, or is everything on the?
I'll do that when we get to the approval of the items.
Awesome, all right, so no comments on that. We will move on to the consent agenda, which is our opportunity to do all of our routine and recurring business items. All of them are detailed in the agenda, so Mr. Pierce, if you would take us through the consent agenda.
Here we go. 4.1 through 4.3 is the approval of the November 13th, 2018 regular, special, and closed session meeting minutes. 4.4 is the personnel report. 4.5, payroll and bills. 4.6, destruction of our closed session recordings from June 17th, 2017. 4.7, approve the purchase of a dump truck. 4.8 is the 2018 fiscal year CAFR. And 4.9 is our 2019-2020 school calendar. 4.10 is the approval of this consent agenda.
All right, so are there any items that any board member would like removed, or any items that you would like further clarification on?
I just want to talk about 4.9, the calendar, for a second.
Okay.
Just a couple of questions and make sure that I haven't misunderstood. End of May 29th, last day of school with 5 emergency days. So, as I understand it, that would mean without the emergency days, we would close the doors
May 22nd?
For this year or next year?
Next year's calendar.
May 21st would be the last day of students, May 22nd would be the last day of staff.
That's my close door, okay. Got that right. We have two teacher work days, scheduled.
We're done, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's
Two, one on
in
the
the front of the
13th
year,
of
one at the-
August.
Oh, okay.
One on the 22nd of May, so to open and close. And we have I'm counting 3 institute days? Four institute days. Do we have scheduled events on those institute days right now?
There's a process, so the CAP group, the Curriculum Assessment Advisory Council, meets jointly with PLAC each year to review what our priorities are for those institute days. The 4 days are required by school code.
So it's lean and mean as we can make it. Okay, thank you very much.
Is that a time you're comfortable?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just wanted some clarification, no big deal.
Great. Then I would entertain a motion to, oh.
One of the things that I meant to also say in my report, the CAFR document that's in this section, this is something that the RAC committee gets to go over, and we split it up. If you're looking for a document that can tell you everything about the fiscal health of our district, this is the document. And Tony, what are your 2 favorite pages? Because that's probably the ones that you should look at.
Page 12 is my favorite.
Page 12. So, I mean, we say that tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but it's actually
Not
pretty
very.
factual because it gives you a really good consolidated snapshot of where we are.
There is an interesting note that goes along with that this year that is worth noting. Our net position went down significantly this year, almost $50 million, and that's because we implemented 2 reporting standards from GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, where we're recognizing liabilities. And we've been recognizing liabilities for pensions for many years, but now we're recognizing liabilities for other post-employment benefits, in particular the teachers' health insurance fund. And that reduces our liabilities pretty significantly, or I should say increases our liabilities significantly and reduces our net position pretty significantly. And the net position is essentially all of our assets subtracting all of our liabilities, long-term debt, pension, those sorts of things. And so it's a pretty big change to implement, and it's a standard that we're implementing, but it has changed our books significantly.
Sorry, that was it.
Oh, no, I just want to make sure that I wasn't cutting you off. All right, I am proud to have a chief business officer who has a favorite page.
Check it out, page 12, it'll tell you everything
I
you
just
need to know.
looked, I know, it's an awesome page. So that said, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. I'm sorry, was that Dreisner?
No, no, no.
Gaspar. Moved by Gaspar, second by Blakely. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, approval. You're welcome, Tony. All right, next item on our agenda is our reports. I'm going to start with Dr. Hutchins.
Sure. Our first 2 reports you see every month, FOIA requests for the month, and then our treasure reports. The next report after that is Tony, but before we kick it back to Tony, do you have questions about the FOIA or the treasure reports?
Are we to assume when company, if applicable, is empty, that is just a concerned citizen?
Or interested citizen.
Interested, concerned.
There's different FOIA deadlines depending on the purpose of your request. So if you're a company, you would list that there because they might have a different deadline than an individual. A commercial request. All right, no questions, and I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Inglesi, who will talk to us about our financial forecast as promised.
This is another one of my favorite reports of the year. It's a little earlier than normal. We're trying to push our financial forecast as early into the school year as possible so that the information that it provides gives us opportunities to better plan for future school years. We modified the report a bit this year in terms of its format. This report comes from RAC, the Resource Responsibility Advisory council and try to make some improvements to its readability. Just try to simplify it. And one of them being that we start with the outlook and recommendations right at the beginning of the report. And so that's where I'll start, and I'll keep it brief because that report is available for you to read. But fundamentally, our financial position has improved pretty significantly in the last few years. I think it was 3 years ago, roughly, that we were on the state board's financial warning list. And now we're on the state board's financial recognition list. And that's primarily due to the fact that our expenditures aren't exceeding our revenues and our fund balance has significantly increased over the last few years, particularly last year. As we just approved that comprehensive annual financial report, our fund balance improved about $3.2 million. That wasn't necessarily anticipated. We thought our fund balance was going to improve about $1 million initially when we started the school year. But we had a couple of fortunate events that happened, one being with the change in the IRS regs, people were prepaying their property taxes to avoid the way that the new structure works in terms of property taxes and interest payments, those sorts of things. And so with that prepayment, we recognized about $1 million of property taxes earlier than we had anticipated. We didn't get more, we just got it earlier. Same thing goes for the new state funding formula, EBF, was called GSA, General State Aid, now it's EBF, which is evidence-based funding. And a number of streams of money were funneled into a single stream, and so we had to kind of catch up with the state's late payments from the past. And again, we're not getting more money from the state. We're getting a little bit more, but not by much. But we got money earlier than we would have otherwise anticipated. So we got about $2 million a year earlier than we would have otherwise, and it really helps us because, as you recall, this board approves tax anticipation warrants every year, probably right about this time, maybe a little bit later, because we run out of cash. We used to run out of cash in the months of April, May, and June, or sometimes earlier than that, depending on how it works. But good news is now that we've improved our fund balances, we're not going to have to issue tax anticipation warrants this year. And as far as I can tell, that's the first time in at least 30 years that that's the case. So we've made some significant gains there for our finances, albeit ones that we didn't necessarily expect. This forecast looks like we're looking at enrollment continuing to climb, probably by about 2% a year, as it has done over the last, I'd say, 6 years. But looking to the future, finances look good if we can keep salaries in line with CPI, which is where we're going to approve the levy next, but that's we're primarily funded by our property taxes, and our property taxes grow right about 2% a year because that's related to CPI. So if we can keep those in line, we'll be in good shape. We can keep staffing in line with enrollment, will be in good shape. But the one thing that we're really struggling with is medical insurance. And medical insurance has gone up pretty significantly over the last few years, and I will talk more about that in just a minute. But I want to give you an idea in terms of our fund balance as it moves forward first. As I mentioned, fund balance has improved and will likely continue to improve slightly each year, not as dramatically as we've seen in recent years, but will improve slightly until 2023 when it's projected that it will start to turn down again. And that's because mostly of medical insurance. One of the key assumptions that we're making in this model, though, is that medical insurance is capped at 5%. And we're not really quite sure if that's a realistic expectation. Because if you look at the average over the last 10 years, our medical insurance has gone up by a little bit more than 9%.
And our contract right now to be 11% above?
And as we're 11% as of right now for this year. And if you look at the last...
That's on top of the premium increases that we already experienced.
So I'm thinking that 5%.
It's pie in the sky right now.
And then if you look at the last 5 years, the average is over 12%.
Have we ever had 5%?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are years where we actually have had less than 5%, but the other years that are bad are much worse, and so there's variation. It's not the same amount every year. There's wild fluctuations, and there's a lot of factors involved.
One thing, and you might have said this before, Tony, why do we choose 5% for our assumptions if we know that's not been our historical benchmark?
Well, because that's what makes the numbers work right now. That's the plain and simple.
You should come to a couple RAC meetings. You would love this stuff.
But we modeled it out. So if you look at, on this report that we're providing to you, page 6. I'm not displaying it, but we could pull it up if Sue could pull up page 6 in the section that we're in. But I'll give you a verbal rundown. We're assuming 5%, And the fund balances will improve slightly for the next few years and then start turning downward. But if those medical insurance increases are higher than that, if they're say 10 or 15%, our fund balances don't fare nearly as well. They go down almost immediately, under 10%, and they go down and they get halved, more than halved in 5 years, if at 15%. Now that's assuming that on average, those increases would be 15%, which would be a terrible assumption, but isn't it far off from what we've experienced over the last 10 years? So we know that we have to do some work to rein this in. Now we haven't done much in the last 10 years to rein in our spending in this area. We've done a few things here and there, but not nearly enough to do so. We know that's the threat that we're facing in the future. All other fiscal issues that the district has faced, we've kind of, I wouldn't say we've got them all figured out, but we're able to manage them. This, we have very tools in the toolbox to manage. I've also shared, so you can see here that Sue is showing is our fund balances. The years are a little hard to read here on the screen. You can see how they kind of crest and start turning downward. And the recent years on the left, our history, you can see how they ramp up on the left side. And so that's where our fiscal experience has improved. But if I could have Sue jump down to page 13, you'll see the primary driver of our expenses in the past and in the future, and that's salary and benefits. It's where the vast majority of our money goes in terms of spending. You can see the last few years on the left-hand side, essentially. We're in fiscal year 2019 now, so that's anticipated. We're going to approve an amended budget here in a moment. But you can see those increases are going up essentially 2% a year, because that's what our assumption is that we can keep salaries in line with CPI. Those would go up 2% a year, and then 5% for the red bars going up in the future. The salaries become bigger proportions of that spending over time. We go down to the next page, Sue, on page 14. You see the scenarios broken out in terms of benefits as a percentage of salaries. So how much we spend on benefits in relation to how much we're spending on salaries. In 2014, it was 21%. So we would spend, for every $100 we spent on salaries, we would spend another $21 on benefits. And that's all of benefits. It doesn't include just medical insurance. It's all, the entire suite would be vision insurance, dental insurance, life insurance, all those things, plus costs related to pensions, like TRS, IMRF, those sorts of things. Fast forward to fiscal 19, that's at 28%. So we've gone up 9% in the last 5 years. But then we've got the different trajectories here that we're modeling for you. The blue line being, if we can hold medical insurance at 5% a year, that line isn't, the trend isn't as steep in the future. But if it goes up at 10%, that's the red line. And if it goes up as much as 15%, that's the yellow line. And so in 5 years from now, going up at 15% each year, we would be at 44% of benefits to salaries, and that would be truly catastrophic. We would have no money left, essentially. We would bankrupt ourselves effectively, very quickly. So we say that the outlook is stable because we can get ahead of this, we can manage this problem if we make some changes. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need employees to pay more costs. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to expect employees to take inferior health care. We have very high quality care, and we can continue to have very high quality care in the future. But the trend that we are on, the course that we are on, cannot continue. And that itself poses the largest financial threat to the district.
And do we have districts that we know of that are containing these kind of costs already?
Yes. A lot of our neighbors, a lot of our districts that we compare ourselves to see between 2, 3, and 4% increases a year. So 5% is very much a realistic number, but we have to take a different approach to managing care. Cost of care increases.
And we're working on that.
And we're working on that. Now, I will tell you, the board gave us a very clear mandate last spring that we were going to turn this around, and we're doing our best to do that in the short term. These aren't the sorts of things that happen on a dime, and we might not necessarily be able to do that in this upcoming fiscal year for fiscal 20, but I think over the next 2 or 3 years we certainly can. I don't expect this problem to solve itself overnight. We certainly didn't get into this problem overnight, but we must solve it.
We must solve it, although I don't like to think of us, say, following the pattern of our neighbors directly to the north, that kind of train wreck that we saw there the last
Well, no, I was
Doesn't
speaking
help
specifically of
anybody.
health insurance.
Right, and well, at the end of the day, compensation, it's a pot of money, right? And we break it out in different ways. And I hope that we can figure this out
I'm confident that we can.
collaboratively without that kind of
We're working on
silliness.
it right now.
So that's the essence of the financial forecast. We have a stable outlook if we intervene and contain medical insurance costs.
Oh, that was a little less depressing than you often are. So thank you.
Wow.
Wow, well said.
Such a charmer.
Happy holidays.
Well, it's been just another awesome meeting.
Nobody else.
Tony, how was work today? It was less depressing.
All right, any other questions on the financial forecast? Any other comments?
There's a lot more information. I would encourage you to peruse that report. There's a lot of other details in there that I've glossed over but are pertinent, so.
And actually, Tony, I've said this before, I really appreciate the clarity and the commitment you've made. I feel like that you have been really good at partnering with the board in helping us to make choices. They're not always the easiest choices to make sure that we have a healthy financial outlook. And I lay a lot of that at your feet. So I do appreciate the work you do. Even when you're depressed, yes, but I appreciate you.
He's also a great mentor because he's got me somewhat excited about this kind of stuff, which
And who would
I
have
never
thought?
thought.
Excited.
Who would have
It is.
thought?
It's kind of exciting. Yeah, I know.
Let's not geek out here.
Oh, God. All right, next item on the agenda, new course approvals, is that Brad?
Yep. So each year, buildings go through a process as they look at student needs. And that starts at the teacher level or the department level. They discuss any new courses. Those go through the school leadership team at both Rotolo and Batavia High School. Batavia High School has 4 classes that they believe meet student needs. So they're proposing those classes. That comes to our Curriculum Assessment Advisory Council. We discussed them at our last meeting and had unanimous approval to bring them to the Board of Education for your approval. You can see that there are 4 courses. One is an AP Computer Science course, which would give us 3 courses in a sequence for computer science, which would accommodate students who have both personal and other experiences in computer science to take their skills where they need to, or students who have no experience with computer science and want to try coding and other things. So that 3-course sequence is very flexible. It's very project-based. The AP curriculum is less jam-packed than other AP curriculums. So there is more flexibility for teachers to really engage students in that process. So that was the AP Computer Science course. The next is an integrated reading and writing course at the high school. This would be equivalent to a Wabansi below 100 level course. And the point of this course is that we want our students to start in 100 level credit-bearing courses for which you can get student loans and for which you would gain actual college credit. So most of our students, a vast majority of them, would have no problem meeting the requirements to get into a 100 level, but there are students that we need to further refine their skills, and this would be a course for them during their senior year so that they could take the AccuPlacer test and test into 100 level courses. And this will be very much a partnership with Wabansi, so we'll model the course after what they do for below 100 level classes. The 3rd and 4th courses, we've been somewhat de facto doing both of these courses, so the fashion design and the interior design. We've been doing these courses through independent study. We have, these courses have gravitated towards the art department, and we have seen a lot of students really take these courses. These were courses maybe 5 or 6 years ago that we saw kind of on their way out, but due to good high quality teaching and engagement of kids, we've seen these classes explode, which we think is a great thing. And students, their only other option to go beyond in interior design or fashion merchandising was to take independent studies. This gives them a curriculum to take that a little bit further. More than likely, these courses would be run concurrent with a fashion design or interior design 1, but we've kind of been doing that anyways through independent studies. So those are the 4 courses that the high school is proposing that went through their SLT and CAC. So next steps, I would bring these back for approval at the next board meeting sometime in mid-January, I think the 18th. But I don't want the board to feel surprised because they will see this already in our course registration stuff. But if the board doesn't approve it, we make other options. But if this is a possibility for students, we wanted it out there. So you will see it already, but we know it's not a done deal until you approve that, hopefully in January.
And again, these all come through CAD.
Yes, lots of clever processes go behind this.
Yeah.
Can I audit the AP computer science class?
I know I need to do that as well, and brush up.
I'm just hoping I'm not learning anything in there, that's why I'm
Right.
gonna audit it.
It's a bad sign if you want to write them.
Always learning, always growing.
All right, those are all of our reports for tonight. Next, we'll move on to the action part of our agenda. The first item for action is under policy tonight. Dr. Hinkins.
Sure. I will be asking for a vote on the first two things that you see in this policy agenda. You saw them last month. There weren't any comments or adjustments that you requested, so I brought them back as you saw last month. The first one is on employee ethics, and there is currently something in your policy about tutoring students or outside employment, and we just expanded that to say if you are tutoring a student, that you need permission to do that, because there are some cases that it is very legitimate, but we also don't, have to be careful so that we know when our teachers and staff members are tutoring the district students. And also if they're using district property for that, if they're charging money and using district property, that there's a rental process that needs to be followed. The second one, and I'll pause after the second one because that's when we'll take a vote on those two. The second one is on graduation requirements. And the way that it used to be written was that all of those requirements were listed in policy, and really policy is supposed to be a little more generic than that, or a little general philosophy, it talks about your philosophy about graduation. And so we pulled them out of the policy and put them into a procedure, which is how press recommends it anyway. And so now we're more aligned with press recommendations, other than the fact that we mirror the state requirements for graduation, other than we have more credit hours that we require because of the block scheduling, and we also have more social studies that we require. And because we do have extra, students are able to take 32 classes while they're at the high school, which is not common anymore among a traditional high school. So questions about those two before we pause and take a vote? The third one we don't need to vote on, we just need to talk about.
So the graduation requirements, if we pull that up and look at that.
Yes.
I just, apologize for being absent in this meeting. Graduation requirements, point number 4 in the first section, passing an examination on patriotism and principles of representative government. What is the exam? What's the exam on patriotism that we're doing?
It's probably the final for
Isn't that the
government
Constitution?
or whatever, isn't it?
Right, it's in the course.
Yes. That's about constitutional government. That's about 3 sections. That's about lots of things. The term.
Yeah, we take a very loose interpretation of passing an examination on that, so it can be done through observational, it can be done in a number of different ways where they talk about these pieces. So there's no written exam on patriotism.
Patriotism. Yeah.
But it is a school code requirement.
Kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted with the standards for that. That was what I was saying.
And it's both in the U.S. history and government classes. They discuss those.
You good, John?
Oh, yeah, interesting.
You good, John? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
yeah, good, yeah.
I didn't want to move on if you weren't.
No, I'm just, the wheels are spinning.
Wheels are
here.
turning?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on those 2 policies? Nope, then I would entertain a motion that the board adopts the revisions to policies 5-120 and 6-300 as presented.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Lowe, second by Blakely. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
All right, then the next one is a procedure. The board doesn't need to vote on procedures, but we don't want to put a procedure into, we don't want to have a practice that you don't approve of. So we brought this back, you gave us some feedback, and now we're bringing it back again. A major change that we made was Tony, when I say we, Tony and I have been working on this particular procedure because residency usually finds its way to Tony if we have any issues. It falls within the operations division. So they rely on this procedure, and we wanted to make sure that it matched what is allowable by law. And so we looked at it, and one change that might jump out is last time we brought it to a 60 calendar days, and we changed it to 40 school days just for consistency, because if somebody moves into the district or says they want to start school on November 15th, and we give them 60 calendar days, that's fewer school days. We just decided to make school days the standard number instead of calendar days, so that we know if we're entering into an agreement with somebody, we're always doing 40 school days, because otherwise we have to count, and if there's a lot of breaks, then the number can vary there could be quite a swing.
Oh, right. I like that. That's a good
Yeah,
change.
and since we are charging tuition, then we wanted those, if we had two families, they would be paying the same amount of tuition, because they'd be paying for 40 days worth of tuition. And we thought that that would be in 2 installments, because the first installment would be very easy to get from a family. Just to take a step back, the only people that would be paying tuition would be non-residents, and the only way to take a non-resident, according to school code, is to charge tuition. We can't just say, sure, come on in. It's very clear. There's a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, the only way to take a non-resident is to charge tuition. And so our practice has been to say, well, you can only come if you have that lease that you're about to move in within 40 school days, or I bought a house, it's not quite done. You're not a resident. Just because you bought the house doesn't make you a resident. You have to actually take residency, occupancy, thank you. And so those families we want to work with, especially at the beginning of the school year, if they say we're going to be here in 20 school days, we want to think about what's best for students. So not every district, but many districts allow an exception and let them come and pay tuition if they know they're going to be here within X number of days. We don't have to have this policy, but it makes sense for students that are coming, just to need that short little bridge of I'm moving here in 10 days, and I don't want to start in a different district where I live, so can I come here for 10 days? So this would allow it. Currently, we don't charge the tuition unless they can't prove residency, and then that isn't really, that doesn't follow school code. So what we're recommending is that we actually charge the tuition up front. Right, that we charge the tuition up front for any family that wants to enter as a non-resident. We charge the tuition, and then during that period, when they become a resident, and here's where it differs from last month when we brought it to you, we would refund the days that they were residents only, because we really need to follow school code and charge tuition if you're not a non-resident. So it would be very difficult for families that are moving into Batavia to say, we'll be here by November, and then they'd have to be able to pay that tuition. It's roughly $75 a day per student. So we probably wouldn't have a lot of families that would take this offer, but we also can't just open the door and say, promise us, pinky swear you're going to be here, and then it's really hard to collect that tuition after the fact if they're unable to prove residency.
And we have to develop policies like this when there's no overarching state, federal law policy that would guide us in this. So in these instances, when there's no other outside direction from a higher up the chain entity, we develop our own policy like this.
Right, that's exactly the procedure. That's how we would implement, because the policy does, it just is really generic. It says you can only take a non-resident if you charge tuition, because that's what school code says. So then we're saying, okay, well, we might make this exception. How would that look?
Okay.
What would happen, I don't know, you and I talked about it yesterday, but I was thinking of something. Let's just say they get to the second installment. It's almost to the next 20 days is up. And for some unforeseen reason, fire codes or something, or mix up, they've got to extend it. Now, do we stop it there, or can that be extended? Because I remember, I think you said yesterday something like that, when it's done, it's done.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, if it's out of their control,
Mhm.
the house is practically built, but they just can't get the occupancy yet. I'm just wondering, what do we do then? Just by,
We wrote in here, we took it from
There's a-
somebody else's neighboring district, that request for additional days would be at the sole discretion of the superintendent.
okay,
And so like if somebody said, it's 2 days, look at, here's my builder, here's a letter from my builder, I just need 2 more days. But if they said, oh, the house fell through, we're gonna look for another one, then I would have some discretion.
okay, all right. All right. Thank you.
So what are your thoughts about this version?
Any objections, any concerns?
No, I think this is okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We will, and we do have some families that have contacted us that want to move in as non-residents because they're purchasing a house, or they want to attend as non-residents, so we told them to, that we'll be discussing it.
Yes, good point, excellent point.
Yeah, we've already got, if they're,
Sorry, we're full up.
we have a plan.
It's like
for it.
bookends. All right. Amendment of the 2019 budget. Tony, I'm going to throw that one to you.
So we're asking that you amend your 2019 budget. That's the current fiscal year that we're operating within now. And the primary driver for the requirement of that amendment is the approval of the BESPA contract. If you recall, we adopted the budget before we approved the BESPA contract. And by law, you can't spend any more money in a given fund than what you've adopted in your budget, and we do that with the BESPA contract. We've also taken the opportunity to update all of our estimates in terms of revenues and expenditures. There have been some things that have changed between then and now. And so the net effect is that the original budget saw a surplus of, projected a surplus of 2 million, likely see a surplus around 1.5 for 2019. It was within our expectations.
And all changes are based on current reality, not based on any estimates, right?
A budget's a plan, and plans change.
Questions on our amendment? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the amended budget, 2019 budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dryden, second by Gasper, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Can we do that one?
Yeah.
Apparently we can voice vote almost anything, can't we? I told Tony to stop me the time we can't, because he's our guy in charge. All right.
And then there's interfund transfers, and this is the implementation of your budget. This was in the original budget and is in the amended budget and is unchanged. It moves money between funds, primarily for debt service. Debt service is a special fund that has to account for all debt, and the way the auditors do it, we have to move money from the education fund to the debt service fund, because the debt service fund only gets money through the levy process in terms of bonds and how the clerk levies the money for those bonds. So we need to move a little bit, right around $250,000 from the ed fund to the debt service fund to pay for our equipment leases, our computers and our copiers. We need to move $150,000 nearly from our operations and maintenance fund to debt service to pay for the maintenance shop on Main Street. And then we need to move $1.8 million from operations and maintenance to the capital projects fund, and that's how we fund our capital projects in recent years. We've contributed a nice consistent amount, and then that money gets spent oftentimes in different fiscal years because of the way capital projects, just when payments, timing falls, those sorts of things. We don't want it to necessarily throw off our operating budget, so it's kind of like a savings account for capital projects. But we need to obviously have board action to do that, and that's why we're asking.
And none of these numbers have changed from what we've been talking about?
No, not since with the original budget. So this is implementing the budget.
Are we doing this earlier?
This is earlier than last year,
Okay.
yes. Our auditor said you should be doing this earlier than later, so that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay. Any questions? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the interfund transfers as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Lowe, second by Beatty Bar. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Property tax levy. You got a bunch of good stuff on here.
This is good stuff.
The Tony Show tonight.
As we've remarked, and as every Batavia taxpayer knows, local property taxes pay the lion's share of the funds for the school district. And this is where the board has its authority, has taxing power, and this is the effect of that taxing power. Your taxing power is limited by the tax cap, and the tax cap has an interesting mechanism for how it operates, but its effect, it limits what you can levy in a given year. But this is what we're doing, is we're levying property taxes to pay for operating the school district. This is the 2018 property tax levy, even though taxpayers won't be paying these bills until next year. So, as it works is we levy amounts, and this year we're going to increase the levy from what was extended last year by 2.58%, or excuse me, 2.94%, and that's to $68,600,000. And the funds are broken out in terms of the different areas of the levies. At the bottom here, we levy for educational purposes, operations and maintenance, transportation, retirement, on down the line, special education, those sorts of things. The net effect of what it might mean for a property taxpayer in Batavia, the median value of a home being $275,000, assuming that that particular home went up with the average that we're anticipating in our overall district's EAV, which is this year 3.28%. They would see a property tax increase from just the school district of $131. That would bring their total taxes to $5,368 each year. Now, there are a lot of factors that go into property taxes. Your assessment may go up, your assessment may go down. So there's a lot of things that can happen. In fact, our levy could be a little bit different. In fact, our tax rate could be lower. If our EAV comes in a little higher, well, that could have effects here too. This is just a projection, but in all likelihood, it's going to be something very near this. And property tax owners owning a median home could expect a little bit more than $100 in a property tax increase for next year.
A little closer to 100.
Yeah, a little closer to 100.5.
Questions on our levy? I appreciate, Tony, the fact that none of these are ever a surprise. We've had lots and lots of time to talk about them. It's a continuing conversation. We'll talk about them again soon and again.
Yes, that's true. And one thing to mention is I would have otherwise forgotten, so thanks for mentioning that, but the levy is codified into the budget. So when you adopt the budget in a fiscal year, levies span 2 fiscal years, and so once we adopt the budget, we're essentially building our assumptions into the levy. So if you wanted to change the levy, the time to do it is at the time that you adopt the budget, not necessarily when you do the levy. It's just how we do things in the state. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it works.
But you've been doing a good job of helping us to recognize that before we've made decisions that we can't go back on. So we also appreciate that. All right, questions on the levy? All right.
In a perfect world, like say we get
when we don't
health insurance. Yeah, I know. Say we get health insurance in check, and we come up with a management plan that puts us on a very predictable, steady line, and enrollment continues to decrease. Is there a potential to have like a long-term objective to like decrease this levy amount?
It would be hard to do because the way the tax cap works is you lose your taxing authority if you don't levy the full amount.
Oh.
So your discretion, you don't have discretion anymore with the tax cap. And some districts have done that in recent years and not levied the full amount, and then now they're in very, very, very big trouble.
Okay. So there's
so
negative
when things
consequences.
change, you don't necessarily have the latitude to correct those problems. Yeah. There are other ways around that. You could levy the full amount and then abate, and this district did that for a number of years, if you recall. We had a tax rate pledge, if you recall, and that the only way the tax rate pledge worked was through abatements. And unfortunately, the Great Recession hit, and the abatements weren't sustainable anymore. They just weren't not even close to sustainable anymore. And it's kind of like the rubber band snapped, and the reaction in the community was very bad. Instead of taxes going up a little bit every year, they remained low and they were going down, and then taxes went up big time. And no, anybody who lived in town at the time hasn't forgotten about that.
I think I was the only one lucky enough to be on the board that made that decision.
Yeah, it was a tough decision, but it had to be made. So those are the kinds of conversations we can have. They're generally,
I'm just curious,
not productive because there are so many factors involved. And your options are limited.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to adopt the 2018 property tax levy as presented.
so moved.
Second.
Moved by Betabar, second by Lowe. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, property tax levy approved. Those are all the action items on our agenda tonight. We do have closed session. There is no action after closed session, am I correct? Correct. So there is closed session on the agenda tonight, but before we go there, administration comments.
Start with the good news, just wishing everybody a happy and safe break, all the students and faculty and families. Now for the not so great news, Sue and I will be updating the website with our updated calendar. We did take a snow day, remember that, how fun that was on November 26th. But we do have to make up that day, and we wanted to make sure the families knew that we do make up those snow days, unless you have a senior.
Seniors don't.
But that day, so as of tomorrow, we'll put that up on the website. We've updated it to show the snow day, and then the new last day of school for students pending no further emergency closing days is Friday, the 24th of May, and then the teachers would have a work day on Tuesday, the 28th. So that'll be up on the website, so when people are planning their summer break, they can have the most up-to-date information, and hopefully that's the last time we'll have to update it this year. That's it.
That was easy.
Can't believe you said that. Just
We're thinking positive. Remember, we're optimists.
yes,
right,
yes.
Bob?
That's actually part of my notes.
All right, John Gaspar, we'll start with you and work our way down.
Thank everybody at RJAC for everything they've done, and Tony for all the financial stuff. Thank you. Thank all the speakers that came out and all the emails that we received recently. We do listen to them and read them and take them to heart. I want everybody to have, my wife and I went to the high school last night for the art show, the AP art show.
That was good from the pictures.
It was very fascinating, just the creativity and bizarre, what I would call bizarre. And I talked to some of the...
Any man wearing that shirt.
But the artistic work that they did was amazing, and chatted with the kids about that, and it was very intriguing what came across on what they thought and how I would just do a stick figure, so I give them all kinds of credit on that one. Hopefully the staff and the students will enjoy the break. Wish everyone a good Christmas, happy holidays, and a joyous new year, and come back ready to go. It's all yours, John.
Boy, what a night. Particularly want to thank Mr. Kraus for bringing this data in. It's something that we should put on our agenda. We should talk about it. We should figure out what it means, what the data is telling us, what kind of fixes can be offered. I don't know if any of the rest of you had a chance to look through this packet. It's pretty stunning. Something we ought to put on the agenda. Fourth grade parents, we feel your pain. There was a magic fix for this. We would, I can't speak for everyone at this table, but if there was a magic fix, we would have done it. We would do it. And I really appreciate the staff at Louise White and the effort that they're putting in to make the best of a situation that is not optimal. But we will continue to do what we have to do to work on that. Final point tonight that I would make, medical insurance that we've been talking about. I fear that what we have projected is not doable. And I really, we're gonna need some real heavy thought about how to get from where we're at to where we need to go. And the teacher strike in Geneva recently is something that it's such a disaster for everybody involved, and it's something that I worry about confrontation down the road if we can't figure out a way collaboratively to get to containing costs with our own DEA. And I have to just go on record and say, look, guys, right now I'm really nervous about this. And I know it must be on some of your minds too. So it's just going to take some real genius to figure this one out. Anyway, I'm done. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays. I'm sorry we missed Hanukkah, but there we are.
Thanks, John.
A couple words I heard tonight were collaboration over and again, and Kathy just mentioned optimism. I'm actually a pretty optimistic person. I tend to find the humor in a lot of stuff that we do just because sometimes it just makes it easier. But I was very encouraged by the parents that spoke tonight on behalf of their fourth grade students, and a lot of them mentioned collaboration as well. And we're so lucky in this community to have a community that cares that much, to know that they can rally together and build that community even in that kind of challenging situation. So I think that, yes, they're dealing with a lot right now, but them coming to us and sharing and knowing that we've got a chance to fix this, it kind of probably spun out of control. I heard chaos earlier too, so I can imagine 31 fourth graders. But I am optimistic that we're coming up on a time where there's going to be giant opportunity for collaboration, and I know this community can come together and figure this out. It's going to be hard, much like RAC and the insurance committee, but there's a lot of good work that gets put into that, and a lot of good collaboration, and we do get outcomes. So I'm optimistic, and I'm also excited for Christmas. So Merry Christmas.
Thanks, John. Always enjoy your optimism.
Merry Christmas. Have a good holiday.
Chris?
Echoing kind of what some of my other board members said, I am very happy to live in a community where we have such collaboration and optimism. I would also like to emphasize communication. I love the fact that community members feel comfortable enough to come and voice their concerns with us, and that we listen and the administration listens and our teachers listen, and we work together to come up with the best solution that we can with the resources that we have. So I trust the system. It's not perfect. We will constantly be working to improve it, but hopefully it continues to work and does the best thing that we can do for kids. So I am optimistic. So with that,
2 votes for optimism.
yeah.
It's hard to top what my board members have shared, so I will just entertain a motion for us to adjourn to closed session to discuss collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Gaspar, second by Rowe. All in favor?
Aye.